In the quiet distance, under a pale and endless sky, old castles rest upon the hills like silent witnesses of time. Their stones have softened with age, their towers no longer sharp but gentle in the evening light. Around them, the grass moves slowly with the wind, and the world seems to breathe in long, quiet waves. The sound of the earth is low and steady, and everything that once lived here has become part of the stillness. Long ago, these castles were alive with the rhythm of work and life. Hands carried stones, hammers struck with patient care, and voices drifted through the air like soft echoes. Every wall was built not just from stone, but from the breath of those who shaped it. The walls remember the warmth of the day, the smell of dust and lime, and the faint songs people hummed while the sun slowly sank beyond the fields. Inside those walls there were lights once. Small flames flickered in narrow halls, spreading gold against cold grey stone. The air held the scent of bread, of wood smoke, of damp earth after rain. In quiet corners, someone might have rested for a moment, watching the light move across the floor, feeling the coolness of the walls beneath their hands. The castle was a living place then, slow but full of steady motion, like the tide of the sea. Time has passed gently since then. The sounds of iron and footsteps have gone, and only the wind remains, whispering across the broken towers. Moss grows on the stones where banners once hung. Windows that once watched over busy courtyards now open to silence and sky. The stones are patient, holding the shape of a world that has drifted into sleep. At night, the air becomes softer. The hills fade into shadow, and the castles seem to breathe with the rhythm of the earth. Water glimmers in the moats below, still and silver under the moonlight. Somewhere an owl calls, its voice low and calm, then silence returns, deep and unbroken. The world around the old walls is gentle again, untouched and eternal. When dawn arrives, it does so quietly. The light spreads like a slow exhale across the grass, over the stone, through the empty windows. The air tastes fresh, almost new, and the earth begins another calm day. The castles remain as they always have, slow and still, watching without moving. The stones hold the warmth of the sun, as if they remember the hands that once built them. In the small hours between night and morning, when everything is halfway between dreaming and waking, the world around these castles feels endless. The air moves like water, cool and silent, carrying the scent of soil and dew. Somewhere deep inside the walls, the echo of a distant life drifts like mist, faint, harmless and kind. It does not speak, it simply lingers, like memory resting. Now they are places of peace. There is no need for battle or for voices to fill the air. The walls no longer guard or divide, they simply stand, open to the wind, to the seasons, to the quiet flow of time. They have become part of the landscape itself, blending into the rhythm of the hills, into the patience of the sky. When evening comes again, the colors fade to silver and grey. The last light of the sun touches the highest tower, then slips away. Shadows gather gently around the base of the walls, wrapping them in soft blue tones. In this moment, the castles seem to close their eyes. The world breathes out once more, slow and deep. Nothing stirs except the whisper of the air. And so the night settles over everything. The earth is cool, the sky vast, and the ancient stones rest quietly beneath the moon. They have seen lifetimes come and go, yet they remain calm, unchanging, steady. The castles sleep, and the world sleeps with them. Time continues its quiet drift, gentle and endless, carrying all things toward the same soft stillness. The builders of the Silent Kingdom. The castle stood complete beneath a calm sky, its towers touching the pale clouds that drifted without sound. Around it, the land stretched open and wide, with soft hills and slow rivers winding through the fields. The stone of the walls had taken on the color of the earth, grey and warm in the light, cool and silent when the shadows came. The years of labor had settled into the structure, leaving behind a stillness that seemed almost alive. Within the walls, new sounds began to appear. The light rhythm of footsteps, the creak of wooden doors, the low murmur of voices moving through the halls, the rooms filled with the soft noises of daily life, a broom sweeping over stone, water being poured into a basin, fabric brushing against wood. Smoke rose gently from the kitchens each morning, curling above the roofs before dissolving into the sky. The scent of bread and grain carried through the air, simple and steady. Outside, gardens began to grow. The soil, once dry and turned by carts and builders, softened again beneath the hands of those who planted. Herbs and flowers spread slowly, reaching toward the sun. The sound of the wind moved through their leaves with the same calm whisper that once drifted across empty scaffolds. Birds nested among the stones, finding quiet corners where vines began to climb. Life returned to the ground, not in bursts, but in patient motion. The people who lived within the walls carried their days in rhythm with the castle. They rose with the first light, moved through their tasks without rush, and rested when the evening came. Each motion felt measured and sure. They tended the fires, cared for the animals, walked through the courtyards as the sun moved across the sky. The sound of their footsteps was light, blending with the faint hum of the air. Every gesture was small, every moment complete in itself. At midday, the sunlight poured through the narrow windows, spreading thin streams of gold across the stone floors. Dust floated in the beams of light, moving like drifting stars. The air was warm then, filled with the quiet sounds of work and rest. Sometimes a soft melody from a distant voice would rise and fade again, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Time stretched long, smooth, and even like the horizon beyond the fields. When the evening came, the castle grew softer in tone. Shadows lengthened, covering the courtyards and towers. Torches were lit, their flames bending with the breeze. The glow spread across the walls, turning the stone a deep amber. The sound of conversation slowed, the halls grew dim, and the sky outside deepened to blue. The castle seemed to exhale, settling into stillness once more. As the night advanced, everything returned to quiet. The air cooled and carried the scent of the forest beyond the walls. In the stables, the horses shifted in their sleep, hooves tapping lightly against the floor. Somewhere in the kitchens, a fire burned low, its light flickering softly across the walls. The castle rested as if breathing, slow and calm, wrapped in its own warmth. Seasons continued to change, each bringing its own rhythm. In spring, the fields beyond the walls turned green and alive. The rivers ran faster, carrying reflections of the sky. The air smelled of new grass and rain. In summer, the stones of the castle grew warm under the long light. The gardens bloomed, and the sound of water from the well mixed with the calls of swallows flying above. Autumn brought stillness again. The trees turned gold and red, leaves drifting gently across the courtyards. And in winter, the snow came, quiet and deep, settling on every ledge and roof, softening the world, until it was almost silent. Through it all, the castle remained unchanged. Its towers stood firm against the wind, its walls carried the warmth of countless days. The people came and went, generations passing like shadows moving across the same floor. The rhythm of their lives echoed through the years. The same footsteps, the same fires, the same soft sounds of living. In time, the walls began to hold not only the sound of work, but the silence of memory. The marks of use appeared on every surface, the smooth stone of the steps, worn by many feet, the handles polished by touch, the wood darkened by time. The castle grew older, but not weaker. It became gentle in its age, its sharp edges turned soft by the wind and the years. The air inside carried a cool calm, like the breath of stone itself. Outside, the fields stretched far, the colors changing with the seasons. Villages rose nearby, their lights visible from the towers on clear nights. The castle watched over them quietly, neither ruler nor servant, simply present. The world around it moved at its own pace, while the castle stood steady, breathing in the silence of centuries. Sometimes, on long afternoons, the air would grow still, and the castle seemed to listen. The sound of the wind would fade, the birds would rest, and a deep peace would settle over everything. The sun would hang low, painting the towers in warm, pale light. Shadows would move slowly across the walls, stretching and fading as the day ended. Nothing hurried, nothing changed too fast. It was as though the whole world had found its balance in that stillness. As the years passed, the people continued to live in quiet cycles. Children grew, learned the paths of the halls, and later walked those same paths as adults. The elders sat near the windows, watching the light move across the courtyard, their words soft and few. Life went on without rush, carried gently forward by time. And beyond the walls, the landscape continued its calm rotation. Rivers changed their course little by little, forests grew and thinned, and the sky remained wide and endless. The seasons painted the earth with quiet patience, each color blending into the next. The castle, in the middle of it all, stayed unmoved, as if it had always been there, as if it would always remain. When night came, it came gently. The air cooled, the sounds faded, and a soft darkness spread across the land. From the windows of the castle, the stars could be seen, countless points of silver light drifting above. The torches burned low, their glow reflecting on the stone. The world seemed to breathe in unison, steady and slow. The castle rested, and so did everything around it. Through centuries, storms and calm, warmth and snow, the same rhythm endured. The castle had become part of the land, part of the wind, part of the silence that lay beneath all things. Its story was no longer told by voices or words, but by the simple presence of its being. It was not waiting, nor remembering, nor longing. It simply was. And in that quiet existence, there was peace. The towers no longer reached for the sky, they merely stood beneath it. The walls no longer enclosed, they simply held the air inside. The stones, once carried and placed by countless hands, now rested in perfect balance with the earth. Time had slowed around them, soft and deep. As dawn returned once more, a pale light spread across the horizon. The mist lifted slowly from the ground, the grass glistened with dew, and the first birds began to stir. The world awoke again, calm and complete. The castle, washed in light, breathed quietly in the still morning air. Nothing had changed, and yet everything continued. The day began, as all days did, with peace. The nights, honor, and time. The sun rose slowly behind the hills, spreading a soft light across the stone walls of the castle. The air was cool, and the morning mist drifted along the ground in quiet ribbons. The castle, strong yet gentle in its stillness, watched as another day began. Inside, the sound of metal stirred faintly, the low hum of armor being lifted, the slow rhythm of movement echoing through the corridors. The knights who lived within these walls moved with calm precision. Their footsteps were measured, their gestures quiet. The sound of steel, though steady, was never harsh. It was the rhythm of discipline, shaped by years of repetition and patience. In the pale morning light, their armor caught a faint shimmer, soft and silver, like water beneath the sun. They did not rush. Their actions flowed from memory, from the long practice of days that came before. Each knight carried a sense of purpose, though it was not loud or bold. It was quiet, simple, and enduring, like the weight of the armor they wore. The air around them seemed to slow, their movements blending with the calm stillness of the halls. The castle accepted them as part of its being, as though the stone and the steel had grown to understand each other over time. In the courtyards, horses waited patiently. Their breath rose in small clouds against the morning air. Hands brushed their manes, checked the leather straps, tightened the buckles. The scent of hay and earth filled the space, mingling with the faint chill of dawn. When the gates opened, the sound was low and deep, echoing through the valley. The knights rode out slowly, their movements unbroken, their pace gentle against the soft ground. Beyond the walls, the land stretched wide, endless and quiet. The fields rolled like waves of gold and green, and the wind moved through them in a steady rhythm. The knights followed paths that had existed for generations, trails worn into the earth by countless journeys. Sometimes they would pass through forests where the light filtered through the leaves, soft and shifting, painting their armor in patterns of gold and shadow. The sound of their horses' steps on the earth was steady and calm, blending into the quiet of the land. Their purpose was not conquest or glory, but presence. They watched over the fields, the rivers, the villages nearby. They moved not to rule, but to maintain the quiet balance that had settled over the land. Their honor was found in stillness, in patience, in understanding the rhythm of the world around them. Each gesture was simple, each action part of a greater calm that stretched beyond their own lives. At dusk, they returned to the castle. The light faded slowly behind them, turning the sky into shades of amber and grey. The sound of hooves softened as they passed through the gates. Inside, torches were lit, and the smell of burning wood drifted through the air. The knights removed their armor piece by piece, setting it down with care. The metal cooled against the stone, and silence filled the room once more. In the evenings they gathered in the great hall. The fire burned low, its glow steady and warm. Voices were quiet, words spoken softly, blending with the crackle of the logs. They shared their meals without hurry, the rhythm of the night slow and peaceful. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, brushing against the windows like a whisper. The castle felt alive in its calm, breathing in time with those who called it home. As night deepened, the halls grew darker, the flames dimmed, and the air grew cool. The knights rested, their minds uncluttered, their bodies still. Their dreams were light, like drifting leaves upon a quiet stream. The castle cradled them in its vast, patient silence, and the world beyond seemed to pause in respect for their rest. Seasons continued their cycle. Spring returned with the scent of new blossoms, summer with long golden days, autumn with the slow fall of leaves, and winter with snow that blanketed the towers in white. Through each season, the knights remained. Older now, their movements slower, their eyes softer. They had become part of the rhythm of the land, their presence as steady as the walls that surrounded them. When they trained, it was no longer for victory, but for balance. Their swords moved through the air with grace, each motion smooth and quiet. The sound of steel was muted, absorbed by the open sky. It was not a dance of battle, but a meditation, a reminder of precision and control. Each breath matched the movement, each step followed the rhythm of the earth beneath them. The younger ones watched, learning not through command but through silence. They followed the same slow pattern, their bodies adjusting, their thoughts steadying. The lesson was not about power but about harmony, a quiet connection between strength and calm. And when the training ended, they stood together, breathing softly, their eyes turned to the horizon where the sun drifted low. Time passed in this way, gentle and unbroken. The faces changed, but the rhythm remained. The same halls heard new footsteps, the same fields saw new riders, the same sky looked down upon each generation. The castle endured, patient and kind, holding the stories of all who had lived within it. The wind carried those stories beyond the walls, spreading them across the land like seeds of memory. In later years, when the oldest knights walked the courtyards, their pace was slow but steady. The weight of time had softened them, but their calm remained. They moved as part of the stillness they had once protected. Their armor hung in the halls now, polished and silent, a reflection of years gone by. The younger ones cared for it, cleaning each piece with quiet reverence, their movements unhurried and precise. At night, the moonlight reached through the high windows, falling across the empty armor. It gleamed faintly, silver and still. The light moved slowly, crossing the floor like water, touching each stone before fading into the shadows. The air within the castle felt endless, filled with the sound of silence. It was not empty, but full of presence, the weight of time resting softly on everything it touched. Beyond the walls, the land slept. The rivers flowed without sound, the trees stood motionless, the stars drifted in their patient orbit. The castle and the world were one, bound together in peace. There was no need for words, no need for movement. The story continued without voice, carried forward by the quiet passage of time itself. And so the knights, the castle, and the land became inseparable, a single breath held within the vastness of the earth. Their honor lived not in victory or memory, but in stillness, in the quiet understanding that all things endure through calm. When morning came again, the light returned, touching the towers, the armor, and the walls. The air shimmered gently, carrying the scent of grass and stone. The world stirred, not with noise, but with awareness, a soft awakening, another day beginning exactly as it always had. The castle stood as it always would, steady and silent, breathing in the rhythm of time. The Feast of the Empire. The light of morning stretched across a different land, where the air was warmer and the sky wider. Stone buildings glowed pale gold beneath the sun, their arches smooth and endless, their shadows long and soft upon the ground. The city rested by the edge of the sea, and the water moved quietly against its walls. The sound of waves was calm, steady, blending with the rhythm of distant footsteps echoing through marble corridors. Here, the empire lived in its own kind of stillness. The streets were broad, lined with columns that reached toward the blue sky. Gardens filled with olive trees and fountains shimmered in the light. The air carried the scent of fruit, of warm stone, of water falling gently from carved basins. People moved slowly through the courtyards, their garments flowing with each step, their voices low, blending into the hum of the day. The empire breathed in time with the sea, calm and unbroken. Within the grand halls, preparations began for the evening feast. The sound of movement was soft like the rustle of silk against stone. Servants placed long tables beneath archways where the air was cool. Bowls of fruit caught the sunlight: grapes, figs, pomegranates, their colors deep and still. Plates of bread were set out, and jugs of wine glimmered red in the shade. Every gesture was deliberate, every sound measured. There was no rush, only the slow unfolding of ritual and routine. As the sun drifted lower, the halls filled with a warm golden hue. The marble floors reflected the light, and the air shimmered softly, like the calm surface of the sea. Musicians tuned their instruments in quiet corners, their notes light and gentle, rising and falling like the wind. The scent of roasted grain and honey drifted through the air, carrying the promise of evening. The world outside continued its slow rhythm, while inside, everything waited in peace. When the first guests arrived, the sound of footsteps echoed softly through the arches. Their voices were calm, their laughter subdued, their movements graceful. The long tables filled slowly, the glow of lamps spreading across faces and hands. The music began not loud, but fluid and smooth, a slow pattern of strings and flutes weaving through the air. It carried the same rhythm as the sea outside, unbroken and endless. The feast began not with noise, but with silence. Hands moved, passing bread, pouring wine, sharing the simple weight of food and time. The conversation flowed softly, the sound of words blending into the music, fading into the quiet between breaths. The air was warm, filled with the faint aroma of herbs and grain. Every sound seemed to move in harmony, every motion part of the same slow current. Beyond the hall, the night deepened. The sea turned dark blue, the stars beginning to appear above the rooftops. Their reflections trembled faintly in the water, shifting with each small wave. Inside, the lamps flickered gently, their flames steady but alive. Shadows moved across the walls, long and soft, touching the carved stone and fading again. The music continued, low and constant. A gentle rhythm carried through the hall, rising and falling like breathing. The guests leaned back, their voices growing quieter, their gestures slower. The air felt heavy with warmth and calm. Nothing pressed forward, everything settled into balance. The empire itself seemed to pause, wrapped in the glow of its own stillness. Servants moved like reflections, their steps soundless on the marble floors. They refilled cups, adjusted candles, and moved away again, blending into the soft hum of the hall. The night grew deeper, the stars brighter beyond the open archways. The city outside had quieted, the sound of waves reaching faintly through the air, brushing against the music and merging with it. At the center of the hall, the fire burned low. Its light shimmered on polished bronze, on the surface of the wine, on the folds of fabric. The heat was gentle, barely rising, the warmth spreading slowly through the air. The musicians played softer now, the notes stretching longer, fading into silence before returning again. The rhythm was constant, but unhurried. The sound of peace turned into melody. As the night went on, the hall became quieter. Conversations faded into murmurs, and the soft crackle of the fire filled the pauses. Some guests sat with eyes closed, listening to the gentle sounds around them, the faint rustle of fabric, the echo of a string being plucked, the sigh of wind through the open arches. The world had slowed to its gentlest pace. Time itself seemed to drift like smoke. The feast continued, though the food no longer mattered. The act of being together, of sharing the same still air, had become the purpose. The Empire's heart beat softly within these walls, not in triumph or power, but in presence, in the quiet weight of each passing moment. The marble glowed faintly in the lamplight, smooth and cool beneath the touch. The air moved with a rhythm that felt eternal, calm and certain. Outside, the moon rose above the city, spreading silver across the rooftops and the sea. The light touched the columns, the gardens, the still water of the fountains. The waves shimmered, their edges soft and white against the shore. From the open halls, the music carried outward, fading across the night until it met the ocean breeze. The Empire slept while still awake, breathing with the world around it. As the final notes faded, the musicians rested their hands. The last sounds drifted upward, dissolving into the air. The guests remained for a while longer, speaking softly, watching the candles burn low. When they rose to leave, their movements were slow, their steps quiet. The hall remained behind them, warm with the scent of wax and fruit, the glow of the last flame flickering across the stone. Outside, the streets were empty and calm. The city was bathed in the quiet blue of moonlight. From the harbour came the gentle rhythm of water moving against the boats tied to the docks. The air was cool now, carrying the faint echo of music and the warmth of the night. Each house, each archway, each column stood still beneath the stars. The Empire, vast and old, rested in perfect balance. It did not sleep in darkness or wake in light. It simply continued, steady as the tide, endless as the wind. The feast was over, but its calm remained, filling the air like the echo of a dream that never fades. The city, the sea, the sky all breathed together, slow and even, holding the moment within the quiet flow of time. And as dawn approached, the light began to change once more. The stars dimmed, the horizon softened with color, and the sea turned pale gold beneath the first touch of morning. The Empire stirred, not with noise, but with gentle awareness. Another day began, calm and complete, flowing forward exactly as the last had ended in stillness. The voyage of the Northmen. Far to the north, beyond the soft borders of the Empire, the air grew colder and the light took on a silver hue. The sky stretched wide and clear, pale and endless above the sea. Waves moved slowly across the horizon, dark and smooth, carrying the reflection of the faint sun. Along the distant shore, the sound of water brushing against rock was steady and low, repeating without end. The land there was quiet, shaped by wind and frost. Mountains rose like shadows in the distance, their peaks hidden beneath white mist. Valleys opened between them, filled with still lakes that mirrored the sky. The forests stood silent, their trees tall and dark, their roots deep in the frozen ground. The scent of pine drifted through the air, sharp and clean, blending with the salt from the sea. It was a place of calm strength, where the earth and sky seemed to meet in silence. By the shore, wooden ships rested on the sand. Their hulls were carved smooth, their shapes long and narrow. The men and women who built them moved with quiet focus, their hands tracing the grain of the wood, their tools marking slow, even lines. The sound of work was soft, a steady rhythm of wood meeting iron, of rope drawn tight, of waves touching the shore. The ships took form patiently, each plank fitting beside another, bound by care and time. When the tide began to rise, the ships were ready. Their sails hung loose in the cold air, pale against the dark water. The people moved calmly, loading supplies, checking the ropes, preparing for the long journey ahead. There was no noise, no command, only the slow cooperation of practiced hands. The sea waited, its surface trembling faintly under the light. When they set sail, the ships slid across the water as though carried by breath. The sails filled slowly, and the wind began to hum through the ropes. The coast fell away behind them, fading into mist. The sound of the sea surrounded everything, the creak of wood, the whisper of waves against the bow, the sigh of air passing through the sails. The rhythm of the journey began, calm and continuous. The days upon the sea were long and gentle. The horizon stretched in every direction, a circle of grey and silver that never ended. The sky changed slowly, clouds drifting in soft layers, sunlight breaking through in narrow beams. The water moved like fabric, folding and unfolding beneath the ships. Each wave rose and fell in time with the breath of the wind. The people aboard spoke little. Their movements were steady, their faces calm. They knew the sea's rhythm and they followed it without effort. At night, the stars appeared in great numbers, bright and cold above the open water. The sails glowed faintly beneath their light, and the reflection of the sky shimmered across the sea. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of salt and wood. The ships moved quietly, their wake spreading in slow ripples that vanished into the dark. Time passed gently, marked only by the rising and setting of the light. The sea was not cruel, only vast. Its power was quiet and complete, its patience endless. The travelers understood this and met it with the same calm. They adjusted their sails when the wind shifted, they waited when the air grew still, they slept when the waves rocked the ships into silence. The ocean became their companion, its voice constant but kind. When storms approached, they came softly. At first, the wind deepening, the clouds gathering along the horizon. The sea grew darker, its movement heavier, but even then there was no fear. The people moved together, pulling ropes, adjusting the masts, guiding the ships with careful precision. Rain touched the water, blending into it without sound. Lightning flashed far away, lighting the edges of the clouds for only a moment. Then the storm passed and the calm returned, as if nothing had disturbed it at all. Days turned into weeks, and still the ships moved onward. They followed the quiet paths of the sea, guided by wind and memory. Sometimes they passed near coastlines where mountains met the ocean, their slopes covered in shadow. Smoke rose from distant settlements, thin and grey against the sky. The travelers watched from afar, their eyes steady, their minds at peace. The journey itself was their home. When they stopped, it was only to rest. They found calm bays where the water was shallow and clear. The ships came to a gentle halt and the people stepped onto land. They built small fires near the shore, the smoke curling into the cool air. The sound of laughter was quiet but soft, blending with the crackle of wood, and the hum of the wind. They mended their sails, gathered food, and slept beneath the open sky. The land gave them comfort, but their hearts belonged to the sea. At dawn, they sailed again. The air was still and the water lay smooth as glass. The light spread slowly, turning the horizon pale gold. The ships glided forward, their reflections moving beneath them. Seabirds followed for a time, their wings brushing the surface before vanishing into the distance. The sound of the sea returned steady, endless, like a song that never changed. As the seasons shifted, so did the journey. The air grew colder, the days shorter, but the calm remained. Frost formed along the edges of the ships, glistening in the morning light. The travelers wrapped themselves in warm cloth and continued on, their breaths rising in soft clouds that drifted away. The ocean held them gently, its vastness wrapping around them like a blanket. In time, they reached new lands. The shorelines rose from the mist, their cliffs white and silent, their forests dark and deep. The ships touched the sand with care, their bows resting softly upon the earth. The people stepped ashore, their movements slow, their eyes taking in the stillness around them. The world was vast and quiet, and they became part of its rhythm once again. They built small dwellings near the coast, their fires glowing through the evening fog. The sound of the sea never left them. It echoed softly beyond the dunes, constant and familiar. They lived as they had always lived, close to the earth, close to the water, their days guided by the same steady rhythm that carried them across the waves. When night returned, they sat by the shore and watched the horizon fade. The sky filled with stars once more, and the ocean shimmered beneath them. The sound of the waves was slow and even, a heartbeat that belonged to the world itself. The ships rested nearby, their sails folded, their wood dark and still. The people closed their eyes and listened to the water breathing. In that quiet, there was no beginning or end, no destination, only the soft movement of life within the great calm of the sea. The journey continued, not in distance, but in rhythm. The wind, the waves, the earth, and the sky all moved together in perfect peace. And as dawn approached again, the first light touched the water, spreading across the sea like a whisper. The ships shone faintly, the waves glimmered silver, and the world awoke once more, calm and unchanged. The Northmen sailed on, steady and patient, their voyage a part of time itself, unhurried, unbroken, and infinite. The marks upon the skin. When the long voyage ended and the ships came to rest upon the quiet shore, the people of the north settled among the stillness of their new land. The air there was cool and clear, filled with the scent of salt and pine. The sea stretched behind them in endless grey calm, and the forest waited beyond the dunes, its trees dark and unmoving. The world seemed to breathe around them, slow and steady, as they built their homes from wood and stone. The days passed gently. Smoke rose from the hearths in thin trails that disappeared into the clouds. The sound of the sea was constant, soft and deep, rolling through every hour. The people worked with calm precision, shaping tools, mending nets, carving wood, smooth beneath their hands. The rhythm of their lives matched the rhythm of the world, patient even, unbroken. In the evenings, when the sun slipped low and the air turned pale with mist, they would sit together near the fire. The flames moved softly, the light resting upon faces and hands. Some spoke little, others hummed low tunes that blended with the wind. Their voices were gentle, the language of memory and peace. In those quiet hours, they often marked their stories not upon stone or paper, but upon their skin. The markings began with lines, thin and careful, drawn with the precision of those who understood time. The ink was made from ash and oil, dark and smooth. The hands that worked it moved with stillness and focus. The act was never hurried. Each mark was a motion of calm, the touch of a tool, the slow breath of the one receiving it, the faint hum of the fire nearby. The marks told no tales of victory or loss. They spoke instead of balance, of connection, of the endless motion between sea and land, wind and stone. Some were shaped like waves, their curves flowing across the skin as if following the tide. Others were simple lines, steady and straight, like paths through quiet fields. Each one belonged to the person who bore it, yet all shared the same still language. The skin became a map of belonging. It held the story of each life not in words, but in form, the steady rhythm of patterns repeating across generations. Children watched as their elders marked the lines, learning the patience of the process, the softness of the touch. The ink sank slowly into the skin, dark at first, then fading slightly with the years, until it seemed to live beneath the surface like a whisper. The markings were made not for others to see, but for the self to carry. They reminded the bearer of the sea's calm, of the forests that swayed without sound, of the journey that continued even when the sails had folded. The body became part of the landscape, a vessel of memory, silent and enduring. When the work was done, the skin glowed faintly beneath the light of the fire. The air smelled of smoke and oil, of sea salt and pine. The marked ones sat quietly, their eyes half closed, breathing in rhythm with the wind that drifted through the open door. There was peace in their stillness, and the marks upon their skin became as natural as breath. Over time, more marks were added. Small shapes near the wrist to honor the strength of the hand, curved lines along the shoulders to echo the pull of the oars, faint spirals near the heart to trace the rhythm of life itself. The markings grew not as decoration, but as continuation, the body changing with the years and the stories changing with it. The ink deepened, the patterns widened, and still they remained soft against the skin, never sharp, never loud. The craft of marking was passed quietly between generations. Each artist learned to mix the ink, to prepare the tools, to wait for the right stillness before beginning. It was never done in haste, never in noise. The world outside could move as it wished, the storms, the seasons, the tides, but within the small circle of firelight, time seemed to hold its breath. Sometimes, when the nights were long and the air was filled with the sound of distant waves, they would speak of the meanings of the marks, not as lessons, but as reflections. A line across the arm could remind one of a path once walked. A circle near the collarbone could speak of return. A spiral at the wrist could hold the memory of water, always moving, never ending. But mostly, the marks needed no words. Their meaning was felt, not said. The sea watched from beyond the dunes, its rhythm unchanging. The moon moved slowly above it, casting silver light upon the water. The marked people sat in that glow, their skin faintly gleaming, their patterns catching the light like quiet constellations. The waves rose and fell, their sound merging with the breathing of the sleepers. The night was deep and kind. As the years turned, the markings became a part of every life. When a child was born, a small mark would be made, not a symbol, but a beginning, a line of potential. When one grew older, new marks would come, each one placed with care. When someone passed away, their skin, patterned with the lines of a lifetime, was returned to the earth, and the stories upon it returned to silence. The marks did not fade in meaning, they continued unseen but alive in memory and in air. The hands that worked the ink grew old, but their touch never lost its calm. Each line drawn was a moment of balance, a connection between past and present, between body and world. The ink was the same as it had always been, the color of night, the texture of earth, the scent of the fire. The act itself was timeless, as patient as the sea beyond the walls of the settlement. In every movement, there was quiet understanding. The marks were not made to remember names or deeds, but to hold the essence of stillness. They were the reflection of a people who lived close to the earth, close to the sound of wind and water. The body and the land were one, both written upon by time. When the evening came again and the last fire burned low, the marked ones rested beside it. Their skin shimmered faintly in the soft light, lines and shapes merging with shadow. The sound of the sea filled the air once more, gentle, constant, eternal. The night seemed to lean closer, its darkness smooth and safe. The marks upon the skin glowed like stories told in silence. They carried the peace of 1,000 nights, the calm of endless water, the patience of all that endures. In the stillness, they breathed with the world itself, part of its rhythm, part of its quiet, unending sleep. The Last King. The centuries passed with the calm of wind over water. The world changed in gentle waves, and the places once filled with song and labor grew quiet beneath the weight of time. Where kingdoms had stood, only the shapes of their walls remained, softened by moss and rain. The air carried the faint echo of what once was not as memory, but as rhythm, steady and unbroken. Far from the northern shores, across plains of mist and stone, a small kingdom lingered. Its towers were pale, its fields wide and gold beneath the morning light. Rivers wound through the land like silver threads, and the mountains stood distant, their peaks hidden by clouds. The kingdom lived in peace, untouched by war, untouched by haste. It was a land that had learned to move slowly. Within the heart of that quiet realm stood a single castle, tall, calm and grey. The walls were smooth, the courtyards clean, the air heavy with stillness. The people who lived there worked in silence, their lives steady and simple. The bells no longer rang for battle or celebration, they marked only the passing of hours. The king who ruled them was old, his voice gentle, his gaze clear. He had long understood that his time was not for conquest, but for calm. Each morning, the king would rise before the sun and walk through the gardens. The air there was cool and damp, the scent of stone and grass soft upon the breeze. He moved slowly along the paths, his steps measured, his thoughts quiet. The flowers bent under the weight of dew, and the sound of his breath mingled with the song of distant birds. The world greeted him not with ceremony, but with peace. He wore no crown, only a simple band of iron upon his wrist, a mark of his place, plain and unadorned. His robes were light, his movements without haste. When he spoke, it was softly, and those who heard him listened not for command, but for calm. His words carried no grandeur. They were the rhythm of his life, quiet and sure. The people of his court lived in the same manner. They spoke gently, worked carefully, and rested often, The great hall was filled not with music or feasts, but with silence and light. Tapestries hung along the walls, their colours faded to soft hues of brown and blue. The air was cool there, moving through open windows that looked out toward the hills. Time seemed slower inside those walls, as if it respected the stillness that lived there. The king's days passed in simple cycles. He met with his councillors beneath the light of morning, shared his meals in the shade of the courtyard, and watched the sunset from the highest tower each evening. From there, he could see the river winding through the valley, the farms spread wide across the land, and the faint smoke from hearths far below. It was a view of peace, the kind that asked for nothing and promised nothing, only quiet. Sometimes, when the sky grew dim, he would descend to the old hall where the records of his ancestors lay. The shelves were lined with scrolls and books, their pages yellowed by time. He would touch them gently, his fingers tracing the edges of stories too old to read. He did not open them often, the words no longer mattered. What mattered was the weight of their existence, the calm endurance of memory itself. The king's face bore the marks of years, not as burden, but as patterns, soft lines shaped by thought and patience. His hands were steady, though his strength had long faded. The people loved him quietly, as they loved the land, without need for display. His rule was not one of decree, but of presence. He did not lead them forward, he simply stood with them as time moved past. When he grew tired, he spent more hours beside the great window of his chamber. The light there was always gentle, filtering through thin drapes that swayed with the wind. The sound of the river reached even that high place, faint and steady. Some evenings he would rest his hand upon the cold stone of the wall and feel the pulse of the earth beyond it. Slow, vast, eternal. The seasons continued their endless turn. In spring, the air smelled of new leaves and rain. In summer, the fields shone gold beneath the sky. Autumn came with quiet winds carrying the scent of harvest, and winter with its still white silence. The king watched them all with the same calm eyes. Each season passed not as a change, but as a continuation, one moment folding gently into the next. When the first frost of his final year came, the king felt it in the air not as warning, but as rest. The land had grown soft beneath the weight of snow. The rivers slowed, the birds flew lower, and the castle grew quiet. He spoke less, walked slower, and spent his days in warmth and stillness. The people moved through their work with the same rhythm as before, though their eyes lingered longer upon the high tower. One night, as the wind whispered through the narrow halls, the king sat beside the fire. The flames glowed low, and the shadows shifted softly across the walls. He looked upon the marks of time, the stones, the tapestries, the tools resting by the hearth, and smiled faintly. Everything around him had outlived noise and haste. Everything had become still. He closed his eyes, his breath deep and even. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the roofs and the roads, blanketing the land in white. The air was cool and silent, the kind of silence that holds the whole of the world within it. By morning, the fire had burned down to ash. The king sat as he always had, his hands resting on his knees, his head bowed slightly. The servants who found him did not cry. They moved quietly, covering him with a pale cloth, their steps soft upon the stone. Outside, the river flowed on, slow and unchanging. The days that followed were peaceful. The bells rang once, their tone deep and calm, carrying across the valley and fading into the wind. The people gathered not to mourn, but to be still. They stood together in the snow, their breaths rising like mist, their silence full of understanding. The king's body was laid beside the river under a single oak that had grown there for centuries. The water passed by without sound, reflecting the grey of the sky. The castle remained, patient and unchanged. The walls, the halls, the windows, all breathed with the same quiet rhythm. The land lived on without a ruler, without command. The people continued their days as they always had, slow, careful, and kind. The kingdom did not fall. It simply drifted into peace. And so the age of kings ended not in battle, but in stillness. The last ruler had carried his realm to rest, not through power, but through calm. The wind moved across the land, soft and steady, carrying his memory like the faint scent of rain upon stone. The world turned, the rivers flowed, and the stars watched in silence. The kingdom slept, its dreams gentle and deep, its story carried onward by time itself, unbroken, endless, serene. The fall of the walls. After the last king's passing, the kingdom grew quieter still. The castle stood as it always had, tall and grey against the open sky, its towers watching over fields that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. But the footsteps that once echoed through its halls grew fewer, and the air within the walls began to fill with stillness. The world outside continued, patient and unchanged, while the stones began their slow return to silence. Seasons passed gently one after another, each leaving its soft trace upon the land. The people who had once tended the gardens now moved farther from the castle, settling closer to the rivers and forests. Their days followed the rhythm of the earth, the planting of seeds, the gathering of wood, the quiet of evening fires. The castle became a shape upon the hill, familiar but distant, a part of the horizon rather than the heart of life. The first signs of change came not with sound but with light. Sunlight slipped through cracks in the roof, touching the dust that drifted in the air. The beams moved slowly across the stone, revealing the color of age-pale moss upon the floor, fine webs that shimmered near the windows. The air smelled of damp earth and time. The walls no longer stood in perfect lines. They leaned slightly, softened by the years. But nothing fell. Everything settled gently, like breath released after a long day. Rain came often, carried by winds from the distant sea. The drops slid down the stone, darkening its surface, gathering in small pools before disappearing into the ground. The ivy that grew along the base of the walls reached upward, its green tendrils slow and patient. It did not fight the stone, it embraced it, winding into the cracks, wrapping itself around the memory of what had once been built. Birds nested in the high corners of the towers. Their wings brushed against the stone, leaving faint marks of movement where once there had been banners and guards. The sound of their calls echoed softly through the empty halls. The castle, once filled with human voices, now spoke in gentler tones, the rustle of feathers, the whisper of wind, the steady rhythm of rain. In the great hall, where kings and knights had once gathered, the floor was covered with leaves carried in from the open doors. The wind moved through them, lifting them, setting them down again. Light filtered through broken windows, painting slow patterns upon the walls. The echoes of footsteps were gone, replaced by the sound of time itself, a sound without hurry, without end. The people below rarely came near. They would sometimes look toward the castle from the fields, watching how it changed with the seasons. In spring, the vines bloomed with small white flowers. In summer, the stone glowed warm beneath the long light. In autumn, golden leaves clung to its edges before drifting away. In winter, snow covered the roofs and towers, softening their shapes until they seemed part of the clouds. The castle had become a landscape, not a building. Inside, the air grew cool and still. Dust gathered upon the old tapestries until their colors faded into gray. The chairs and tables, carved by hands long forgotten, remained where they had always been, though their surfaces now bore the marks of time. A single cup might rest upon a table, filled with rainwater, reflecting the light that entered through the cracks. The stillness was complete, yet never empty. It was filled with quiet life, the breath of air, the motion of insects, the slow decay that carried beauty in its patience. The walls began to crumble, not with violence, but with grace. A stone would loosen and fall, landing softly among the grass. Another would shift slightly, settling deeper into the earth. The sound was gentle, the movement almost invisible. The fall of the walls was not an ending, it was a return. The stones, once lifted by hands and shaped by tools, now sank back into the land that had given them form. Moss spread across the fallen stones, covering them in soft green. Small flowers grew between the cracks, their roots reaching deep into the soil. Water gathered in the hollows where once there had been steps. Frogs rested there, their quiet songs joining the sound of the wind. The castle, which had stood for generations, began to blend once more with the world around it. At night, the moonlight touched what remained. The towers shone faintly, silver and soft, their outlines fading into the dark. The air was cool, filled with the scent of wet stone and grass. The walls, though broken, seemed at peace. They no longer reached toward the sky. They rested within it. The stars looked down, their reflections trembling upon the shallow pools of rainwater. The night was deep, but it was kind. Years turned into decades. The land around the castle grew wild and full again. Trees rose where courtyards once stood, their branches stretching toward the open sky. Birds sang from those branches, their voices bright and gentle. The rivers shifted their course, drawing closer to the base of the hill. Water flowed where once soldiers had marched, its path smooth and unbroken. The castle had become a forest, a part of nature's quiet design. Travelers who passed through the valley sometimes stopped to rest among the ruins. They would sit upon the fallen stones, listening to the sound of the wind moving through the tall grass. Some spoke softly of what they thought the place might once have been, but their words faded quickly. The ruins did not need stories, they carried their own silence. Those who lingered long enough felt it a peace that came not from stillness alone, but from acceptance. As centuries continued to drift past, the name of the kingdom was forgotten. The maps that once marked its borders vanished. Only the hill remained, green in summer, white in winter, golden in autumn light. The stones of the castle had long since become part of the ground. The earth held them close, their shapes smoothed by time. The last traces of human hands were gone, but the calm they left endured. And so, where walls had once risen, there was now only sky. Where towers had once reached upward, there were trees. The air was filled with the same quiet rhythm that had lived within those stones, the rhythm of breath, of wind, of time, moving without end. The fall of the walls was not loss, it was balance restored. At dusk, when the light turned soft and gold, the land glowed as if remembering. The grass swayed where the great hall had stood. The river reflected the fading sun, its surface smooth and unbroken. The sound of evening filled the air, the slow call of an owl, the whisper of leaves, the faint sigh of the earth as it settled into night. The world had reclaimed what it had given, not through force, but through patience. The stones that once divided earth from sky were now the meeting place between them. The castle was gone, but its peace remained, spread across the land like mist at dawn. And as night came once more, the stars shone upon the hill, lighting the quiet ground where walls had fallen. The air was cool, the earth still, the silence complete. What was built had returned to rest, and the world slept in perfect calm. The dream of the earth. When the walls were gone and the stones had returned to the ground, the land exhaled in peace. The air seemed lighter, the hills smoother, the rivers wider and slower. What had once been shaped by hands was now shaped only by wind and time. The silence of the kingdom had deepened into the stillness of the earth itself, calm and endless, without beginning or end. The grass grew thick across the old foundations, soft and green beneath the steady sun. Rain fell gently, soaking into the soil where the great halls had once stood. Small flowers appeared, delicate and pale, opening with the dawn and closing with the night. Their scent drifted through the valley, light and sweet, like the memory of something long forgotten. The air was filled with the hum of quiet life. Insects moved through the grass, their wings glimmering in the light. Deer passed silently through the trees that had grown where walls once stood. Birds built nests among the fallen stones, their songs carrying softly across the open fields. The land had become a living dream, where every motion was slow and full, and every sound blended with the rhythm of the world. The rivers flowed through this dream with patience. Their surfaces shimmered like glass beneath the sun, reflecting the endless blue of the sky. They wound through the hills and past the ruins, carving gentle paths that caught the light. In their depths, the old stones rested, smooth and round from years of movement. The water whispered around them, speaking in the language of eternity. At night, the earth seemed to breathe in sleep. The stars hung low and bright, scattered across the sky like seeds upon dark soil. The wind was cool and kind, moving through the grass in soft waves. The world did not dream of people or kings, but of stillness itself, of the quiet turning of its heart through time. Each night was a breath, and each dawn a gentle awakening. Sometimes clouds drifted low across the valley, wrapping the land in mist. The trees disappeared into the grey, and the rivers glowed faintly beneath the fog. The air grew thick and soundless. In that moment, the earth seemed to hold itself in thought, as if remembering the touch of stone, the echo of voices, the warmth of fire. But the memory passed like the movement of wind over water, leaving only calm behind. The mountains that bordered the valley stood silent and watchful. Their slopes were covered with forests that swayed with the rhythm of the seasons. Snow rested upon their peaks, shining in the sun. When the light changed, their colors shifted slowly from silver to gold, from blue to gray. They were the oldest witnesses, and even they seemed to rest in quiet understanding. Through countless years, the land changed, but never hurried. Forests grew and fell, rivers shifted, clouds came and went. The stones of the old castle sank deeper into the soil, their shapes fading beneath layers of roots and moss. Yet nothing was lost. Every fragment, every sound, every breath became part of the dream that spread through the earth. In spring, the air shimmered with new life. Water ran clear and quick over the stones, and the first shoots of grass broke through the frost. The fields turned green again, bright and full of scent. The song of birds returned to the mornings, blending with the whisper of leaves. Everything moved together, calm and complete, as if guided by one steady heart. In summer, the land glowed under the long light. The rivers slowed, their surfaces smooth and bright. The forests grew thick and cool, the air heavy with the smell of pine and earth. Time seemed to stretch wide, each day unfolding, with the same patient rhythm. The world felt endless and at peace. Autumn came with soft gold. The leaves turned one by one, drifting down to rest upon the ground. The air grew lighter, the days shorter, the nights cooler. The world seemed to prepare itself for rest, not with sadness, but with calm acceptance. The wind carried the scent of rain and soil, a reminder of what would soon return. Then winter arrived. The sky grew pale and the earth fell into silence once more. Snow covered the land in white, smoothing the shapes of the hills and forests. The rivers slowed beneath a thin layer of ice. The trees stood motionless, their branches heavy with frost. The world slept, and the dream deepened. Beneath the snow, the earth held its breath, quiet and unbroken. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the snow sparkled like crystal. The wind moved softly across the valley, stirring the surface into gentle waves. The air was cold, but full of life. Beneath the frozen soil, roots waited for spring, patient and strong. The dream continued, steady and sure, like the pulse of time itself. Through it all, the earth remained constant. It did not seek or remember, it simply was. The mountains stood, the rivers moved, the grass grew and faded, and the stars turned overhead. The cycle repeated, not in haste, but in harmony. Every end folded quietly into a beginning, and every beginning carried the calm of what had come before. There were no voices left to tell of the kingdoms that once stood, no names carved into stone. The wind moved where it wished, untroubled by memory. The dream of the earth was not of what had been, but of what always was, the steady balance between stillness and change, between silence and sound. It was a dream without boundary, held together by breath, by rhythm, by time. Sometimes, in the quiet of early morning, when mist still touched the ground and light hung low in the air, the world seemed to hum with a sound too deep to hear. It was the echo of life itself, flowing through stone, water, and sky. It carried no words, only presence. Those who walked the land could feel it, the soft vibration beneath their feet, the gentle warmth in the air. It was the heart of the earth, dreaming. As night returned, the sky filled again with stars. They shimmered faintly, like embers scattered across the heavens. The moon rose silver and still, and its light washed over the land. The rivers caught that light and carried it onward, endless and calm. The trees whispered softly in the wind, their branches bending with grace. The dream of the earth deepened once more, vast and serene. The world slept, but it was not alone. The sky, the sea, the stone, the air all rested together, bound by the same quiet breath. There was no past and no future, only the steady moment of existence, unfolding and folding back again. In that eternal calm, the earth dreamed, and through its dream, all things found their peace. And when morning came again, the light spread gently across the valley. The snow melted, the rivers stirred, and the grass reached upward. The dream continued, alive and endless, carried in every sound of wind, in every motion of water, in every heartbeat of the world. The earth opened its eyes once more, not to wake, but to keep dreaming. The silence beyond the stars. The world turned beneath the sky in its quiet rhythm. Mountains slept, oceans breathed, forests whispered, and the wind moved gently across the valleys. The earth was still, yet alive with calm motion. Above it, the sky deepened into an endless shade of blue that slowly darkened to indigo and then to night. One by one, the stars appeared, scattered like soft sparks upon an infinite sea. Their light was ancient, their glow steady and patient. The night unfolded like a slow exhale, smooth and unbroken. The land below rested in perfect balance. Rivers glided through the valleys, their surfaces reflecting the shimmer of the sky. The grass moved softly with the breath of the wind, and the stones beneath the surface held the warmth of the day. The air was cool now, touched by the scent of soil and distant rain. The last traces of sunlight faded behind the hills, leaving the world wrapped in quiet silver light. Everything moved slower, and the silence deepened. The stars above watched over the sleeping world. Each one burned with a calm fire, steady and sure, sending light across the vast distance of space. Their light traveled for ages before it reached the earth, crossing endless darkness, moving through time itself. Yet when it touched the world, it was gentle, like a whisper, like the memory of warmth. The stars did not speak, but their silence was full of meaning. Far beyond the clouds, beyond the highest peaks, beyond the reach of air, space opened wide. It stretched in every direction, smooth and infinite. The stars floated within it like islands of light in a sea of stillness. Between them lay a darkness so deep that it was not absence, but presence, a quiet so complete that it seemed alive. The vastness of space was not cold, but peaceful, carrying the slow rhythm of existence itself. The earth moved through this sea of calm, circling the sun with patient grace. Its motion was too vast to see, but every leaf, every wave, every breath followed its rhythm. The sun, glowing far away, poured light upon the world, keeping its surface warm, its rivers alive, its forests green. The sun, too, was silent. It burned not with sound, but with serenity, its fire steady, its life endless in its stillness. The moon rose and drifted through the sky. Its light was pale and kind, touching the rivers, the grass, the faces of sleeping creatures. The world below glowed softly beneath it, each lake and hill bathed in silver calm. The moon's path was slow, its presence constant, as it moved through the heavens in quiet companionship with the earth. Its light was the reflection of the sun's gentle memory, softened by distance, softened by time. The stars beyond the moon shimmered faintly. Some were near, some were far, some had already gone dark, though their light still traveled. Together they created a tapestry of quiet flame, woven by time, held by gravity, moved by nothing but the endless breath of the cosmos. Galaxies turned in silent spirals. Nebulas shimmered like faint clouds of color, drifting through the dark with patience beyond thought. Each motion was slow, vast, and complete. If one could listen deeply enough, beyond sound, beyond air, beyond all human hearing, they might feel the heartbeat of the universe itself. It was not a beat of noise or pulse, but of motion, the soft turning of planets, the slow drift of stars, the steady rhythm of creation and rest. This soundless harmony filled everything, from the smallest atom to the farthest cluster of light. It was the quiet truth of existence, a music that had no beginning and no end. On the earth, the night thickened, the forest settled into stillness, the waters calmed, and every creature found rest. The air was cool and full of faint scents of pine, of stone, of sea salt, carried from far away. The wind moved softly through the trees, barely touching the leaves. The world was not asleep in the way of dreams, but resting in the way of being. The silence around it was not empty, but hooey. The moonlight touched every surface, filling every shadow with quiet light. In the high mountains, the snow glowed faintly. In the deep valleys, rivers gleamed with silver edges. The plains stretched wide beneath the sky, each blade of grass holding a fragment of the night. The stillness was vast, yet tender, as if the whole world were held gently in unseen hands. Far above, beyond what eyes could see, galaxies continued their slow dance. Stars were born, shining briefly in their cosmic time, and then drifted back into darkness. New worlds formed quietly in the dust of creation. The rhythm of existence continued, not as movement toward anything, but as an eternal circle expansion and rest, light and shadow, energy and silence, all breathing together. The universe did not think or choose, it simply was. Every star, every planet, every grain of dust was part of its calm and endless body. The same particles that lived in distant suns also lived in the stones of the earth, in the rivers, in the hearts of living beings. Everything shared the same origin, the same stillness. The stars above and the soil below were one. In the great silence of space, there was peace. The soundless void was not emptiness, but fullness, filled with light too faint to see, with motion too slow to feel, with time too vast to name. The stars shone, the galaxies turned, and the universe breathed. Its breath was the birth of worlds and their slow return to dust, a cycle so vast it could only be called eternal calm. The earth, small within this endless quiet, continued its motion. Its oceans shimmered beneath the moon, its mountains slept in their shadows, its forests whispered softly to the wind. Life upon it moved in rhythm, breathing the air, drinking the water, resting beneath the stars. The stillness of space was within it, within every living thing, within every pulse of blood and wave of sea. The silence of the cosmos lived in the silence of the heart. As the night deepened, the stars grew brighter. Their light seemed closer now, though it had traveled for ages to reach the world. The sky above was a tapestry of calm fire, spreading from horizon to horizon. The constellations drifted in slow procession, their shapes forming and dissolving without sound. The air was cool and vast. The world felt small but safe, as if cradled in the arms of the universe itself. Time stretched beyond thought. The galaxies turned, the stars flickered, the planets moved, and still the silence remained. It was not the silence of nothingness, but the silence of perfection, the moment before a breath, the stillness between heartbeats. It was the same silence that had existed when the first light was born, and it would remain long after the last had faded. When dawn began to rise, the stars dimmed one by one. The horizon brightened with pale color, and the moon drifted lower, its light softening into the morning sky. The first birds stirred, their wings catching the faint light of day. The The rivers reflected the sunrise and the air filled with the cool scent of dew. The silence of the stars did not vanish. It remained within everything that moved, quiet beneath the sound of waking life. The earth turned toward the light once more. The sky became blue, the forests green, the oceans silver and wide. The day began its gentle rhythm just as the night had ended it. Yet beneath all sound, beneath all motion, the silence endured. It lived within the light of the sun, within the pull of the tides, within the slow turn of the planet. It was the foundation of all things, unseen, untouched, everlasting. The universe continued, vast and calm, its quiet spreading through every star, every cloud of dust, every motion of time. The stars would fade and return, the worlds would rise and fall, the seas would change and the air would shift, but the silence beyond them would never end. It was the breath of all that ever was and all that ever would be. And so, the story of the world and the stars came to rest. The castles had turned to stone, the rivers had become sky, the kings had become dust, and the dust had become light. Every moment that had passed still existed somewhere, moving through the silence of space. The universe held it all, every sound, every breath, every spark of life within its calm and endless embrace. In that boundless quiet, everything was complete. The stars shone, the earth turned, and the silence beyond them stretched forever, deep and infinite, carrying the dream of creation in its still heart. The world slept, and so did the heavens. The night and the stars, the land and the sky, all were one. The silence remained, vast and gentle, eternal and kind. And within that silence, everything continued to dream,